So I don't know that I have a specific topic in mind for today. I was kind of noting yesterday it was a little bit difficult getting started. It wasn't that I didn't want to talk. I just didn't know exactly how to get started. It's like you have this head full of stuff that you want to get out, but you don't really know the best way to formulate it. I guess that's probably why she asked me to do this, is just kind of collect the thoughts, get them out there, get them in a place that I could then restructure them maybe. Seems like I find myself putting together words in my head, like how I would phrase a particular concept for like my nephew. He's young right now. He's in preschool, or I think it's even like a preschool. And I don't know, there's like this imperative to try and teach him, as best I can. And it's that parenting instinct maybe. But there's so many things that I see as deficits about myself that I want him to know about so that he can avoid them if he wants, right? Like, I don't want to necessarily say you should never live your life this way, because I like my life. I like what's going on. But there are things that I think that had I had these types of information when I was younger and making certain life choices, I wonder if they would have made a difference. So I recently saw a visual demonstration of Bayes' theorem, and it was really, really good. I mean, it was absolutely fantastic. In fact, I'll link to it in the description below if you guys are interested. It's from three brown, one blue, and there's a three blue, one brown. One of those two, I forget. I think it's 3 blue, 1 brown. And anyway, it was just like a visualization and a simplification into layman's terms about what Bayes' theorem is, like basically Bayes' probability, what it is, what it's doing, and then it goes into a discussion of how you can use it to help with inference type of reasoning. So I know a lot of people think like Sherlock Holmes, that's deduction. He's deducing all these things about these people and the things based off of what he sees. That's actually not deduction. That's called inference. It's still logic based, but it's not as concrete. You don't have you don't have constructs like proof of construct from one concept to the other. You use concepts like Bayes' theorem to build up the best probability distribution and then make a decision from that. So what I like, the example given in that video was people were asked, given a certain description of somebody, to guess what their profession was between a farmer and a librarian, and the description was like a neat and tidy person and very meek type of a person. And the study showed that overwhelmingly people chose librarians, but it's irrational to do that, and the reason is because there are current estimates are like 100 farmers for every 1 librarian. So there's just massively more likely that the person being asked about is a farmer than a librarian. Overwhelms whatever stereotype you might have about what a librarian is, meek and tidy and all this kind of stuff. And so it's that, oh, okay, but how was I supposed to know that there were 100 farmers to every 1 librarian? And that's not really the point. The point is, did you even stop and ask about that? Like, how many farmers are there as compared to how many librarians? And then give an estimate. Like, I fell into it. I didn't, I did not think of that at the moment. But that's a really good example of what Bayes' theorem, it allows you to introduce that kind of data, like, oh, wait a minute, if there's 100 farmers for every 1 librarian, I must shift my belief in order to account for that new data. And that's what Bayes' theorem is all about, is how you can how you can use that data and how you can fit it in a way that you can shift your belief based off of mathematics rather than just off of your gut or your emotions or whatever. And I thought that was really interesting. It was something that I passed along to family and like recommended, you got to watch this, you got to think, like this is a way to think, that kind of stuff. And I linked it to some people that I work with, and there was a chat back and forth a little bit about how giving people new facts doesn't change their mind, and so it doesn't really matter. And so if I were to propose this Bayes' theorem and the concept and how to use that concept for everyday thinking and rationale, nobody would care, nobody would listen, nobody would do it. Well, nobody. I mean, the majority of people, I guess. And I find that very interesting because I've been recently, tackling a lot of these ideas, and I've asked myself I've told myself rather the importance of not holding on to an opinion. Don't hold on to a belief like it's the last thing and tying you to this reality or anything. I mean, that's just silly. Allow yourself to flex, and but that's not to say you shouldn't hold beliefs. You shouldn't, come to fundamental truths and then stand by them. I'm not discussing that. But when you have an idea that you don't have any data around, don't hold on to it. And I wonder why people want to hold on to it. So I asked myself, what would it take for me to change my mind? What would it take for me to shift these beliefs or beliefs that I have? And I mean, it really comes down to data, right? Like evidence. If you give me more data, then I can use that data in Bayes' theorems kind of way to adjust my belief. I can open up the restriction, or tighten down restrictions on groups of things. If I have data about it, if I know, oh, ball, okay, I'm looking at all the balls in the world, but oh, I got new data that the only ones I'm interested in are the ones that are blue. That's a huge restriction on that set, and it allows me to shift my belief a lot easier because of this new data. And I just wonder why people have such a hard time taking data and then using that to form their beliefs. Like, what is it about our nature that doesn't want to do that? There were links of studies that people have done that when someone has a belief about something, or if they've made up their mind about something and you give them facts to change their mind, they don't actually change their mind. And I'm like, that just blows me away. Like, what kind of people wouldn't do that? And I'm like, do I do that? If I'm given facts, will I change my mind? And I hope I would change my mind. I mean, it seems kind of ridiculous not to, but then I try and frame it in a way that maybe gives me some perspective, as if I was someone outside of myself trying to convince me of something, giving me facts that maybe I don't understand, and I don't understand how they're facts necessarily. I don't know, but then I would ask questions, I'd clarify, I'd be like, oh, this doesn't sound like facts to me. To me, this declaration that people aren't willing to change their mind based off facts it's like they won't let the person follow up. Do they let the person follow up with questions? Because if I were to if someone were to provide me with facts and I didn't understand how those facts had anything to do with my belief in whatever, I would ask questions until I made that connection for myself. And I'm wondering if this is just not happening in these, I don't know of anybody. Like, I know of some really slow-witted people. I know a lot of people who are very closed-minded, and actually, now that I think about it, I know some people who, given facts, wouldn't change their mind. But these are like the bottom of the barrel, in my opinion. I can't imagine that the average person would do that. I don't know. That one just kind of blows my mind a little bit, and I kind of want to explore why. So one scenario that recently came to mind. I was discussing something about work with a colleague, and I've been working at the same job now for over 4 years, and when I first started, there were a lot of recommendations that I had made, that problems that we were running into, or problems that we would potentially run into if we didn't start fixing certain things and changing the way we do certain things. And Nobody listened. Nobody would. I mean, I wrote proposals. I burnt myself out trying to fix this. Basic things too, like quality assurance, just making sure that what goes out into production is checked and double checked and tested, and these were things people just weren't interested in being a part of. I don't want to do that. I don't want to. And I was like, well, if we don't do that, these problems are going to happen. And over the next 3 years, problems happened, like crazy problems happened, and it was like this constant. I told you. This is why, because if this would have been caught had we been doing this would have been caught had we been doing, and they just kept saying they weren't interested. The whole group weren't interested. And then finally we got merged with other teams and bigger, and other companies, bigger companies, and that kind of thing. And certain practices like these were mandated from up on high, and so we've been starting to implement them very well over the last, say, year or 18 months. And it's this huge I told you so, right? Like, I'm like, what did it take? It took a merger with a huge company for you guys to finally do what you knew you probably knew you needed to do. You just weren't disciplined enough, or for whatever reason you didn't want to do it. I kept thinking that in my head. But I just don't think they would see it that way. Like, if I came to them and said I told you so, I don't think they'd be like, yeah, you did tell us so. No, they wouldn't see it that way. They would see it as, no, what you were suggesting wasn't related for whatever reason, that they take the data in and chop it up in their head and process it and come to the realization, and their facts won't align with my facts, that my experience of how the event took place and all this. So it makes me like obviously I think if you were to have a perfect record of all the events that have occurred, and you had people analyzing that data and showing the causality of everything that happened along the way, if that were even possible, that's really the only way you could have conclusive facts around something like that, right? Like, my interpretation of how the first 3 years at this job were is different than the interpretation that someone else had. And the relevance of the work I've done and the work others have done, and the relevance of the recommendations I've made against the recommendations others have made, and all this kind of stuff, the way it gets chopped up and filtered within people's brains is different than your own. It's different. It just happens differently. And so it's something that I'm trying to tackle and figure out how to best address, so that I can, be a better person, understand the people around me better. If you have so one of my new favorite words, perspicacity, is it's the ability, it's like an innate ability that people have to read a room, say, like someone, people who can get introduced to someone and they can immediately tell about this, I can tell this person is hardworking, or is this person's funny, or this person's smart or athletic, or you can just tell, you get this feeling. And I have a lot of perspicacity apparently, or I'm a very perspicacious person. I don't know. I can read a room. I can read people really well. I'm really good at hiring people, finding proteges that I can mentor, and everyone that I've done that with has been extremely successful in their career. And I'm just, there's this talent that I've either developed or was given naturally somehow. But I believe that the constant search and trying to understand how people behave with the way that they interpret the data around them and make their decisions, and if I can understand generally how people do that, the perspicacity would improve. And so those are some of the soft skills that I really want to try and teach to my nephew, that again I was never even made aware of. The concept never entered my mind. I'm sure it never entered my parents' mind. It's not like they were withholding information, nothing like that. But there are some things that I think about and ponder on that are beyond what the average person does, and I have some confidence in that statement because of what my counselor has recommended I make these videos, because she thinks I have a lot of things up there that other people have never even considered, and I've drawn a lot of conclusions that other people wouldn't even have known how to draw, that kind of stuff. So her obviously, her experience and the way she's chopped up data is up to interpretation, but yeah, I mean, that's kind of why I'm throwing these together, is because I think there's a lot of things that I'm considering that my nephew wouldn't naturally consider early enough in his life in order to gain the proper skill or benefit from, or sorry, I guess rather, gain the benefit from the skill. So one of the things that I think is the most helpful in general life is that perspicacity. If you can read the people around you, and I don't want to say manipulate them, but you can manipulate the scenario. Like you can, it's kind of like you're a chameleon. You can become a chameleon to get the best out of this particular scenario or event that you can before you have to leave or whatever. And it's not like you're turning into somebody else and you're being tricky. It's just that, you know, given two equally equally beneficial options, this one would be easier to get with the group to go with than this one. And I'm cool either way. I know to go this direction to make it easier, to make everyone like me a little more, want to work with me. I mean, this is something I've preached over and over to my mentor, or to my proteges, is that I don't give a shit how good you are if I can't work with you. If you know everything and you can do everything perfectly, I still can't hire you for my team if nobody wants to work with you. You cannot accomplish, no matter how perfect you think you might be, you cannot accomplish what these other 5, 8 people can. You're not that good. You're just not that good. I'm sorry. I've worked with and work with some of the best people in the world at what we do, and I just know that for a fact. We're no longer in an era where you can have that level of specialization across multiple disciplines like that. I think back to the early mathematicians and physicists, Newton and Leibniz and the Bernoullis and all this kind of stuff, and there was so much cross-discipline, and there still is cross-discipline, but it's not the same. Like, you no longer have the scenario where one person, say Newton, you know, he did so much stuff for mathematics, so much stuff for different areas of physics, optics and mechanics and all this, and he also was hugely influential in religion and all these other disciplines. This is not what you would see today. You wouldn't see someone making a mathematical breakthrough, Fields level mathematical breakthrough, and then also going and making like a Nobel Prize worthy economics breakthrough. Well, math and economics, that's too tight. Let's say chemistry or physics. Like, it's not that they don't have the talent, and it's not that they don't have the drive and discipline to do it. It's just not, like, they're so focused now, you can't spread yourself like that anymore. And so that ability, that innate ability to read a room and work with the people around you is so beneficial nowadays, because we have to rely on the fact that the people I'm working with are going to cover areas of knowledge and expertise that I do not have, nor will I ever really get. I mean, I can navigate those waters. You know, I can become familiar enough with things to be beneficial to any team, even, you know, like say medicine. I know nothing about medicine, but if I were put on an engineering team where I was designing software for medicine and I needed to understand enough about certain topics in medicine, I can get myself there by listening carefully, reading journals, reading enough just to get me. I'm not going to become a doctor, I have no interest in that. But I could have that conversation with any expert of any level in the scope of what I'm doing, right? So these are skills you're going to pick up by working with teams. But when I would never expect anyone to be able to say in my position, become as much of an expert as the doctor. It's just not going to happen, right? And so you need to have that innate ability to work well with others in order to have the most opportunities for yourself. That doesn't necessarily mean that you should always work with others. It doesn't mean that you should try and work on every team and do all the things. I'm just saying that if you can work well with others, you get more opportunities, which gives you choices, and you're like, you know what? Of these 10 choices that I have, these suck and these 3 are decent. Let's look further into those. Whereas if you didn't have a personality, you didn't have that charisma, you didn't have that perspicacity, you wouldn't have 10 choices. You'd be lucky to have 2 or 3. And that's the value, I think, and what I want to emphasize to my nephew. And I think his mother knows this very well and will obviously teach him that. But it's something that I had heard in college once. A gentleman had come to a class to give a guest lecture, and he was discussing how in life you come across, say you're navigating a dark maze, really. Like in your brain, as you're discovering and understanding ideas, you're navigating a dark maze, and you come to rooms where you feel out the room, you get an understanding of what's in the room, and then as you expose and lighten up the room, and now you have a better understanding of this area of your brain and knowledge or whatever, you realize there's nowhere to go from here. So you kind of, okay, I've got this room now, and I'm going to go out and look for other stuff. And then later you're doing the same thing, years later maybe, you're doing the same thing, you're constantly navigating and learning, and then eventually you come to another room and you illuminate and you gain knowledge about it, and you notice a door, and you open the door, and you walk through the door, and you've now entered that previous room that you didn't see a door from. And you made a connection between two seemingly unrelated things, and through experience you made that connection. And when he described that, it landed really hard with me. And I have been searching for those moments, right? And I think this is something that's easily missed if you're not looking for it. If you're understanding and learning something and you don't stop and then take the moment to say, okay, now that I understand this, how does this connect to anything else that I understand? And, I mean, there's obviously a little bit of that to kind of, enough to ratchet it in and put it in your toolbox, but how often do you really then stop and analyze, is this tool similar to another tool that I have, maybe in just it's just shaped differently or colored differently, and then you can make that connection? And so this is, if I reinforce from one angle the importance of this perspicacity, and his mother enforces from her angle, he might make some of these connections, right? Like, or begin to understand some of these connections of, oh, there's different ways to experience and come to the same conclusion or similar conclusions, which would then further open up his ability to empathize with others and understand others. And when I say empathize, not like pity them or, oh, these poor people, I need to feel sorry for, not that, like understand. Literally the word of empathize is to understand what other people are going through. And if you can understand what other people are going through, and this is going to sound horrible, you can take advantage of that. And that's not to say that you can take advantage of them, but the scenario, it lends itself to make an opportunity for you to become useful, to open up another opportunity later. Like, oh, you've made now a bridge with this person and they're, whoever they're working with, and now you've made that connection, and later in life that person's going to say, this person was really helpful during that time, and they were able to identify that we needed help. Hey, we need some more help, and now you have an opportunity to do something with someone. It's like you're constantly going to be opening up those doors, and the more that you're able to read those people and empathize with what they're doing, the more opportunities you're going to have. I think that's it for today. I mean, it's weird, I can just keep going and going and going. And I'm sure my wife knows that. But yeah, we're going to call it. I'll see you guys next time.